Happy Monday morning, Rock Hill. It is Monday morning. It is November, and we are in Romans chapter 9. So here's a little quick recap in case you missed it yesterday to bring you up to speed. As Romans chapter 8 transitions into Romans chapter 9, 10, and 11, the key question that's being asked by the Apostle Paul is God trustworthy? After making all of these astounding promises in Romans 1 through 8 in the gospel, the question becomes, has God been faithful to keep his promises to the Jewish people? Because it doesn't seem like they're responding. And the underlying thing is, if God has failed to keep his promises to the Jewish people, then what makes us think that we can trust him with the promises he's made to us? And so that question is driving these three chapters. Is God continuing to be faithful to the promises that he has already made? And the underlying assumption is, yes, he is. And notice, Paul does this at the beginning of Romans chapter 9, not from an ivory tower or some kind of emotionally disconnected way, but there is this deep anguish in his soul that the people that he identifies with as his brothers, as his own people, are not responding to Jesus Christ. And so he says, in just the anguish of soul, if I could even trade my salvation, if I could be cut off from Christ and accursed for their sake, I would gladly do it, taking on this very Christ-like posture of laying down his own rights and prerogatives for the sake of his people. That obviously isn't a negotiation thing that he's able to do. And so he returns to this question again. But before we go back to there, the question for us becomes, do we have that kind of heart for those who do not yet know Jesus Christ, or those who have rejected him, or those who are simply indifferent to him? Is there a deep anguish of soul, just longing that they would see in Jesus what we see? That the gospel never leads us into kind of this us-them triumphalistic mentality, but rather a deep sense of brokenness for those who haven't responded. In part, to answer his question, Paul clarifies by saying you need to know what the promise God made to his people was, and you need to know who he was giving that promise to, because not all of Israel ethnically is true Israel, the people of God. And it's always been that case. In fact, in Abraham's life with Isaac and Ishmael, God chose Isaac over Ishmael. In Isaac's son's life with Jacob and Esau, God chose Jacob over Esau, so that his purposes in election might stand. And what Paul is saying is that it's never been the case that all of ethnic Israel is true Israel. It's never been the case that all of Abraham's ethnic descendants have truly been the people of God. And so that it's not as though God's word is failing. God is doing something that he has always done. And as we zip ahead to chapter 11, we'll see that God will do something once again with the Jewish people. But right now, many of them are choosing to reject him, and God's purposes do not fail. They continue to stand. As we get into the emotional reality of election and the intellectual challenges that we experience of how can God be sovereign and us still be free to make actual choices, I want to invite you back this week to say, is this just? Is this good? Kind of a few underlying assumptions that we had is that God is not arbitrary in his choosing. He is very purposeful in his choosing for his perfect purposes in which we trust him, that God is working things out, that God is not distant or detached from the pain or suffering that we experience. And there are many more things that I hope you will explore with us this week as Paul responds to this charge. Is God unjust in choosing some and not others? So I want to invite you back. May not be the best week to invite all of your non-Christian friends as we wrestle through some of these weighty issues and their implications on our life. However, it will be sensitive to the unbeliever as always. So hope you guys have a great week. Feel free to email or call me with questions as you have them. And I look forward to just open up the rest of Romans 9 next week.